someone you disagree on doesn't have the same faith as you, and some of your points of argument are faith-based, do you bring those up to them, or no, even if they're not of the same?
That's so hard because, oh, that's a really good question, Olivia. It's really, really hard because faith by definition is belief without justification. So, if it comes down to belief, and everybody, let me be clear about this, everybody, our brains, there's a book called The Believing Brain, just recently published, and it was based on modern neuroscience. We are belief-based individuals. We have to have a belief system from which everything follows. There are scientists out there whose belief system is, if it's not logical, it's wrong. And that's the way that they build their system around. So they are completely anti-faith. Now, if you come around that person and you bring up a faith argument, they're going to potentially talk down to you, belittle you, whatever they're going to say about it, and you may have no leverage if it comes down to the faith argument. Now, my challenge to you would be, consider why the faith constructs their view as such. Because I think that's when you can not only see, say, because I know that you're Catholic. I went to Catholic school. I have the catechism practically memorized, in a sense, from just going through the religion classes there. You can look at everything in the catechism and say that it's true because the Catholic Church says that it's true. I would argue that's a dependent relationship. You're doing it just because you're told. On one hand, you could say, I guess maybe it's independent. I'm choosing to become a part of this faith, so I'm going to buy into everything the faith says. I think it helps to go to that next stage and say, you know what, why would the Catholic Church say this? What about their tradition that they're trying to preserve is going to be kept by keeping the rules that they currently keep? And I think whenever you start thinking that way, you almost play the role of, rather than the parishioner, you play the role of the cardinal who's sitting there making the rules. And it gives you a higher insight, a deeper insight, to be able to, even when somebody doesn't see eye to eye with you on a faith-based argument, then you can come up with other reasons as to why that faith-based argument would be there. And I think that's the way, especially for someone, and I bring this up because for someone who is anti-faith, literally, having reasons to justify your faith beyond the fact that it's faith will help that person empathize with where the origins of faith are. And I think that's not a bad thing, because when you really get down to it, and if you read the words of Jesus in the New Testament, he's a good guy to follow. I mean, really, read the word, do unto others as you want to have done unto you. Oh my gosh, come on, that is phenomenal advice. Phenomenal advice. And you literally read those words and you say, you know what, the fact that these people have spent their entire lives, in some cases, preserving what this man said, that's not a bad thing. And I think even the person over here who's anti-faith has to be able to say, okay, I can understand where you're coming from, because ultimately that's for the betterment of people. Even if, for the betterment of that person's mind, he chooses not to buy into faith. That's what I would challenge you to look at. Think like a cardinal, because if you not the bird, the religious cardinal. Because I think when you start to do that, I think you can see underneath it all, and when you see underneath it all, you actually find out that while faith by definition is something without justification, I think that there's actually justifications that you may just have to dig for. Because ultimately, the cardinals are people, and they probably talk things out and had to use words. And you can just find out what those words are, roughly. If any of you guys want to go to eat, you have to leave. That's fine. I just have to leave. I'm kidding. Have a good break. Yeah, Kramer?
Because I came with my own kind of theory of my own, but I feel in this
this is good, yeah.
in this day and age, because I came to the realization that when we have we have our discussions in class, and like, we all have like valid points, and like, we agree on valid points, but
Mhm.
we never come to an agreement, or like, even close to any compromise, or any way of one side saying another side to that
Mhm.
point. And I can't figure, like, I feel like for us to finally like understand one another, we have to go through the same experiences together in a weird way. Because I mean, if you experience the same thing, you have a better understanding of what that is like, and there's a better chance of going through an actual compromise instead of just saying stuff and it's just not going through the other, it's just going out one ear, because it's not going anywhere.
Yeah, Kramer, I'll tell you this. Everything that is in your brain, everything that's in your brain is there because of the experiences that you had. If you haven't had the experience, it's not in your brain. And if you have, it is. I mean, I don't mean to say it so simply. I do mean to say it so simply. I don't mean to make it sound so simple that it sounds stupid. That's actually a really important point, because when you think about it, like, anything that comes out of your mouth ultimately is an assemblage of thought that is referencing all of the experiences that you've had in your life. And in some way, then, everything that you say is sort of a reflection of you. So, I think it is, I think it's insightful to recognize that you and other people in the room may not see eye to eye. And part of the reason why you may not see eye to eye is because you haven't had the same experiences as other people. Like, I'm trying to be honest here about this and candid at the same time. I know one difference fundamentally between your life and my life and the experience that we've had is that my parents have been together their whole life. I also know that while my parents have been together, they argue like you've never seen. Maybe you have actually, but they're really argumentative at times. And so if there are people out there whose parents have this like unicorn and rainbows, happy, both people really deep down inside love each other, marriage, and love each other so much that they just like your friend and his mom, like they just never argue ever. Like, those relationships exist. There's relationships where they truly love each other, but there's disagreement, and they're arguing back and forth. And there's relationships where, whether they argued or not, they're not together. Okay? Like, and I can say from where I'm coming from, I have certain experiences where it's going to be hard for me to see eye to eye with your point of view. And all I can do is use the brain that we have. I mean, we have 1,400 cubic centimeters of meat up here. That's a liter and 4/10 of a liter. That's a decent chunk of, it's not really that meat, it's like fat. But anyways, we got this brain. And it's bigger than most other animals. It's bigger than our human predecessors, at least. And the extra processing ability that we have allows us to simulate experience. We, better than any other animal, are able to simulate experiences that we haven't actually experienced. And I think it's the best thing that we can all do as people is to, even if my parents haven't been divorced, I want to imagine what it's like for them to be divorced and really give that a shot in my mind. Think about how that would affect me, so that whenever someone brings something to the table that I might not be able to totally see eye to eye with, I can at least empathize with them by saying, you know what, I can see where you're coming from. And I think a challenge of being in a discussion of any variety is to put yourself in other people's shoes. Because sometimes someone says something that you're like, where is that coming from? To then think, well, they're a reasonable person, like they're at least alive, living, breathing, and chose to speak something out, like they must have had good reason for it, to then think, what are they possibly bringing that up for? And to recognize, some people bring things up just to stir the pot. From my background in personality theory, one of the cognitive preferences for judgment is someone who has a desire to stir the pot. I actually have that preference myself, and you probably have recognized from a lot of my discussions, I like to leave things open-ended. I'm comfortable with that because I want you to, come to your own conclusion. that's the way I feel that that's a good way to work. There's other people who do the exact opposite. They take every stride possible to bring things together and to find compromise. You can see how those are really exact opposite points of view. Like one is compromise at all costs, and the other is stir the pot at all costs. Those are completely conflicting motives. But you can also see how both of those would potentially lead to productive discussion or lead to productive results, because the compromise that two people never would have seen that is now presented by the compromiser allows both people to see where each other is coming from, whereas the person stirring the pot may allow a point of view that's never even been discussed to come to light. So both of them have their value, and that's that. And I guess what ultimately you have to, what I've tried to recognize through my own study of this kind of thing is different people see things differently, not just because of their experience, but even because of like preferences in different parts of their brain that they prefer to use. And you have to say, in the big picture, like, just know that every way in which someone operates, every personality, so to speak, has its positive and productive ways of showing itself, and has its negative and destructive ways of showing itself. And it's the best thing that you can do as you go through life is just try to see what someone's doing and ask yourself, is this destructive and negative, or is it constructive and positive? And if it's constructive and positive, jump on board. And if it's destructive and negative, try to separate yourself from it. If it's someone that you care about, try to help them. And if you can't help them, you have a choice. Either be tormented by the thought that you can't help them, or sort of let the thought of that person go. Because that's what sort of needs to be happen for your own peace of mind.
Yeah, because you only can worry about yourself. Like, you can worry about people to a certain extent. Like, and all of it thinks about, it's like, it's kind of like being selfish. Like, it still is all about you. Like, they're going to be in your life, but like, if it's just a friend, like, that might not even be your friend in the next future, especially like in high school, because half the people you're friends with now usually aren't friends with you anymore, because you go to college, you meet new people, you don't see them anymore, so you're more busy, so then they don't become your friends anymore.
Maybe, like, helping, the best help for the friend is to find somebody else to help them.
That's a good point too. That's a good point, because sometimes, I'm gonna steal Olivia's. I'm gonna go off what Olivia said, but yeah, sometimes after 5 times you realize, well, hey, I'm not the person to help them, but I do want to help them. So the next thing I'm gonna try is to have someone else help them. That's good advice.
This is kind of random, but I was wondering what the name of that book was called that you mentioned earlier.
The Believing Brain.
Believing Brain. Where can I find that?
Amazon, I'm sure. Barnes. The author, his name is Michael Shermer. He's pretty popular.
Because you said it was like modern day like neuroscience.
It relates to modern day neuroscience. I will tell you that Michael Shermer himself his background is in economics, and he has since getting a PhD become a sociologist. So he thinks of things very logically from his economics background. He also thinks of things very interactively from his sociology background. So when you put the two together, he offers interesting perspectives about how people interact. And I think if you really think about your brain like being, this logical structure itself, I mean, you ultimately have to build premise 1 into your logic system. And if you don't have a logic system, you're a wreck. I mean, you have no self-basis for judgment. And you need to have a self-basis for judgment because you need to make decisions for yourself. Like, if you don't, then other people are making decisions for you, and then what does that say? So that's where I think it's just interesting, because you could build premise 1, I'm going to listen to what everybody else tells me. Premise 1, I'm going to listen to everything that so-and-so tells me. Probably like your friend with the girlfriend, I bet that's what he builds into his thing. Like, I want to find, he's probably like, I want to find someone who's exactly like my mom, to where I can have this perfectly whatever relationship, where he probably has to realize, and what you might tell him is, the fact that you and your mom have such a good relationship is probably because you've worked on it for 16 years, 18 years. And be like, think about that with every girl you meet. Like, if you want it to be as good as your mom's relationship is, you're going to have to work at it for 18 years. That's all there is to it. Like, you can't take two people who have never met each other before and just assume that they're never going to argue if they're around each other as much as a boyfriend and girlfriend are.
It sounds so simple.
It's-
Yet no one ever can.
And he may say, I don't believe you, and say, well, look back at the relationships that you've had, look at the people who've had successful relationships, and ask yourself the question. And even say, oh, but so-and-so, they never argue. And it's like, well, guess what? I bet they argue, just not in front of other people. Because that's something you can definitely build into your belief system. Like, hey, I'm not going to have a cow in public. I'm going to have a cow in private. Like, that's a fine theory to abide by, personally, in my opinion. That's not a bad theory to have. Like, I'm not gonna flip out in public. Okay, good, like, good. Other people can see you as like more stable than you may actually be. What's wrong with that? I mean, seriously.
Wait, has this whole conversation been on record?
It may.
Yeah.